Okay, well, everybody, welcome to Thursday. Today we have Dave Daniels. Dave is in Silver Springs, Maryland, about 8 miles away from DC. I'm very envious of that. So we're going to watch Dave do a painting and walk us through his steps. Dave, welcome to Live Friday.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. And the most important thing I can say is welcome to my studio. I used to think that the Zoom platform was a bunch of work, but it is. But now I get to see hundreds of people. I could never invite you and all of you into my studio at the same time. And geography is also never a problem anymore. We have people from all over. And I was just thinking too that when I teach at the Smithsonian, I get out of my car and I have the Capitol building on one side and the Washington Monument on the other side. And I just want you to know that doesn't get old. It's a beautiful, beautiful place to live. And it's a great joy for me to be here. So I do welcome questions. I can't answer lots of them all at once, but maybe some of my help will kind of ferret them out for me. And the very first thing I'm going to do is show you some paintings that are completed, because I work very large, and you'll see this in a minute, and I work very wet. And so there's lots of things about drying time, and I'm going to be using a lot of Frisket that takes drying time. So I'm going to show you some completed paintings so you'll know where I'm coming from when I show you the other ones. So I'm just going to screen share for a minute.
Yeah, it's ready.
Okay. Don't need that one. There we go. The first two slides I put them in because these are already on the Daniel Smith website. There's a tutorial on how I did this painting, and then on the next one. So if you want more information about that, you can go right to the Daniel Smith website and get it and see this in steps also. The one thing you will never be able to tell from just looking at these is the size. Most of my paintings are 4 foot by 6 foot or larger. And so I know that scares a lot of people, but I really like working that large. That would be equivalent to like 4 full sheets of watercolor paper. And I'm going to show you how I handle those big sheets in just a second. This one is also on the Daniel Smith website. The steps on how I did that. I guess it's not too early to tell you that my training was in botany and biology before I turned to be an artist. So even though I take a lot of liberties with lots of things, my plants will always be constructed correctly. My birds will always be constructed properly, but I do have a lot of fun with color. This is the largest painting I've done. It's about 6.5 feet tall, 4 feet wide. Lots of different textures going on in here. I used some modeling paste and still a lot of masking fluid. I included this one because I love the fact that people look at this painting and look at this painting, and it's only later on that they see that there's a roadrunner down here. I think a discovery is a great part. Great part of any painting. You don't get all the information all at the same time. This was a painting called Sandra's Window. One of my instructors was Sandra Frickleton, and she always brought plants in for the winter time. So
it says I'm in driving mode.
I'm sorry?
No, someone's mic is on.
Oh, okay.
I'm just going to help it mute. Okay. We're
So
good.
this would be another large painting. This is one of the last ones I did. I put this in specifically because I also like to help students answer that question that I get asked all the time. Well, what do I put in the background? First of all, we don't call it a background. We just call it the shape in the back. but I have designed some stencils that I use that give a organic but not definite feel to something in the background. And I'm going to share some of that with you too. This is, that plant was a real favorite of mine. Well, my botany training really shows through here. That's called the cardoon, and it's a huge thistle-like plant. And then these all turn to seed and these finches feed on them. And this is another way that I use stencils. I just set them into wet paint and let the paint collect around them. And then they leave these kind of halo marks. And this was the last painting I did just this week. And it was an experiment on, it's called Terraskin, which is a paper made out of 100% calcium carbonate. It's a lot like Yupo if you've had any experience with that. And these are not painted on. This is paint that's been lifted off. So I'm taking paint away at that point through a stencil. And I think that's it. So the next thing I'm going to do is over here. You won't be able to see my face and my hands at the same time. Did we lose a picture?
Yeah, are you trying to do a share screen or switch camera?
All I have is a blank screen.
There we go.
Okay,
There we go. So you see this as a, you can see that, right?
Yes.
Okay. I don't want to paint one way in my studio and then come paint another way when I do a demo. So I feel I have to tell you about a process that I use with all of my paintings now. I've done it for 30 years, and that is I glue my paper to a piece of aluminum before I start. It's unreversible. You can't take it off. It's a done deal. The disadvantage is you can't get mad and tear your painting up. You have to take a buzzsaw to it, but I have been known to do that. So I'm just going to show you this very briefly because it's pretty much, kind of self-explanatory. This is a piece of Alumilite. It's a commercial product. It's acid-free. It's very, very light. It's durable. And I simply take, almost every art company makes some form of acrylic gel. I squirt it on and then I brush it so that it's smooth. I know this isn't brain surgery, but I set my painting in, set books on it overnight. And then when you can trim the excess off the back, and then you have a perfectly solid piece of paper to paint on, and it will never buckle no matter how much water you use. And you'll see when I'm painting that I use lots and lots of water. Sometimes it sets up like 1/4 of an inch, and it would just destroy regular paper. But once it's glued like this, there's no problem at all. And it also affects the drying time because the only way that this dries is through evaporation from the top rather than anything going in. So I have much more time to finesse what I'm doing here. So that I need to tell you about. And another thing is sometimes when I'm using my grape, if you can visualize this being 10 times bigger than it is, if I want all my paint to go in one direction, all I do is put a wedge over one corner and it just runs, and then I can, so I really need the support when I'm doing my big ones. So you needed to know that. And I also think it's important for you to know how I get to my paintings. As I said, I have a history in botany and biology. And I know when I say the words like value study or preliminary sketch, students' eyes just glaze over. What happens is everyone is so excited about painting, they just want to get to the painting. And then you're trying to solve all your problems with a wet brush in your hand. So what I have my students do, if they're working from photographs, I have them do a simple tracing. You can see through, so that all we're doing is defining the basic shapes of this to-be painting. The more intricate you get, the more shapes you get. And so you can learn to eliminate shapes or add shapes that aren't there. Well, I have one. So this would just be a really simple line drawing of the Caladium picture that I just had. And then students can do a value study right on this piece of tracing paper if they want to. You can use paint, you can use ink, you can use marker. So that that's kind of a twofold. It's also a value study and a preliminary sketch. And one sidebar to all of that is that this is actually the painting I'm going to be working on today. I trace mine onto gray paper, and then I do a value study using black and white paint. For me, it's much more effective than starting with white paper. I think I have a little bit of white paint here. Hang on. Don't know where that went. I'll just use a really dark blue. So I do these value studies right on the page. So that this is supposed to be really dark blue. It came out later than I thought it would. So when I get this all done, all I have to do is figure out, this is the light and dark patterns through my painting. And there's only so many colors that I can get to be that dark. And there's only so many colors I can get to be that light. So we take the black and white and we interpret it into color. I have another one here that I did. Let's see. That was for that painting. Can you see that? So this is the black and white study, and this is the painting I did from it. And I just got my brush on the floor. So between all of that, when I get ready to paint, I have a value study, and I've already done a preliminary sketch. And next I'm going to show you. So this is the painting I'm going to be working on. It's not about a composition in this piece because it's only 2 big Caladium leaves. But I'm going to put on some masking fluid. I almost always use a squirt bottle like this rather than any other thing. And let me zoom in a little bit.
David, while you do that real quick, can you tell us the glue you use again, please?
Sure, it's just acrylic soft gel. I mean, I think most companies make it of some, it dries clear. And here's the squirt bottle. And a lot of people think I just outline when I'm using this batik process. I don't, because I don't want it to look like a color book when I'm all done. So I kind of sparingly move these around. But I will tell you that your eye will always be drawn to a frisket line. So be careful where you put them. If I was going to put a reed or something in the background, I would squirt some of this out into another dish so I could have a flat edged brush to paint on with. And I do have reference materials for all these Caladium leaves, but I've painted them quite a few times, and they have these edges that are really loaded with color and dots.
Dave, why will your eyes always be drawn to where the frisket was?
Usually it's the lightest thing on the page unless you purposely make it darker.
Okay.
And you can play with that idea that, I'm always telling my students about value passages, and you can play with that idea that your eye is going to follow the lights. So you would know that that would take quite a long time to dry. So our first body double is this guy. that I did ahead of time. So this is all dry. And you can see it turns a little bit different color once it's dry. So this is where I would begin painting. I have a live palladium around here all the time. Oh, my brush. I use these rosemary brushes. That's a company. And my favorite was this one, which is called a 170. And as soon as I fell in love with it, they stopped making it.
Yeah.
So
What is that?
now they're replacing this with something called synthetic squirrel. And for the life of me, I don't know why anything would have to be synthetic squirrel. Like there's not enough squirrels around to give us the real stuff. But so I bought up a couple of these when I knew that they were going to not make them anymore. So I always start on dry paper. I kind of assumed that most of you knew what Frisket did, but if you don't know, this is just saving out white paper. It comes off and there'll be a white mark underneath each of those. And don't hold your breath while you paint. It doesn't do any good.
Hi, Dave. This is Rajat here. Which paper do you use?
It's 140-pound arches, but it comes in a roll because my paintings just need it that way.
I see. Thank you.
Sure. That's about the most easily accessible paper I can find. Almost everybody carries that.
Is it cold press, hot press, rough?
Cold press.
Thanks.
David, can you tell us the colors you're using, please?
No. Yes. This I really have trouble naming the colors because I know where they are on my palette and I don't think about the name. This is quinacridone rose, this red in the middle, phthalo turquoise out here, and olive green. And you can see why I don't wet my paper is that it gets plenty wet as it is. And I just like being in control rather than it just going. I like being in control of it.
Does Frisket limit the amount of water you use?
Is Frisket what?
Does it limit the amount of water you can use on the paper?
Not at all. I have to use one of these. This is one of my favorite colors. Surprise, surprise. It's Daniel Smith iridescent blue, I think, electric blue. But I don't know if it shows up on camera, but this is so wet that the aluminum underneath it really supports it and doesn't allow it to buckle. And in the finished piece, this would be stronger, but I have 2 more passes to make. And I don't want it to go too fast, too dark, too fast. So this will dry much lighter. And I'm just going to do this other one over here. And also realize I don't consider this a painting because there's no composition here. It's 2 elongated leaves. But I'll show you the finished piece where it does become a painting.
Do you ever use 156-pound paper?
I haven't, but I'll tell you why. Once it's glued to aluminum, the weight of the paper means nothing. It's only the surface that makes a difference. So I could be using 140 actually, and have, well, the 140 surface is not quite the same, but once you've glued it down, the weight of the paper becomes kind of irrelevant.
Do you have any videos for sale of you doing demonstrations?
I don't. I need a good marketer. I do have a YouTube channel that I sometimes have posted things to.
Good to know. Thank you.
Can you see how wet that is? And it'll dry and create blossoms.
Dave, what about your palette? Is it ceramics?
Yes. Let me pick. It's perfectly, and I use ceramic in the studio, but I could never travel with it. This weighs 8 pounds and it's very heavy.
Definitely.
Why is that better than plastic?
Aesthetics for me. All I have to do is run it under a kitchen sink and it's back to absolutely pristine white. I don't know that it's better. I just feel better about it.
Dave, do you buy these aluminum base at an art store?
Art stores do sell a product now, but it comes in really standard sizes. And it's very expensive. And I have found an outlet for the aluminum that it's a product made for outside signage. So that's why I can buy it in bulk. But there is it on the market now that people can buy, but I can never get them to be big enough for what I wanted. The downside is you have to buy a 4x8 sheet, but the company will cut it up into any size that you want. So I get a lot of deliveries of, and I'm really a fanatic about not necessarily using standard sizes. I think we just get in the habit of doing that. And I really like to play with the idea of changing the size up. I do a lot of long, narrow pieces, you might guess. So as you can see, this is beginning to dry. It's getting lighter. This one still puddles over here. So in a real world, I would leave my studio now and just let this dry, because this whole idea is a layer of Frisket and a layer of paint and a layer of Frisket and a layer of paint. They have to be dry in between. So here we go.
Dave, there is an interesting question. The very big pieces, do you pay to frame them?
I do, just because I'm bucking so many different problems with when I tried to get in an art show, they wouldn't even accept these because they were varnished. If I didn't frame them, I figured that was just one more hurdle I had to go across. I do matte them. I will show you the painting in the back of me. But I do put a frame on them. So this is completely dry. And I know the colors have changed and I know the colors are different than the one I just did, but it's close enough, I think. And what I need to do now is I'm going to re-Frisket some areas. Sometimes I follow a Frisket line that is already there. And then sometimes I veer off and go. So when this is removed, it will not be white paper underneath. It will be the color of whatever it is it's on. And I sometimes put Frisket right on top of old Frisket because it'll run off and just make a little circle around that hunk of Frisket. And I like saving out some white, so that's another place that I would use Frisket.
Another question by Jean. When
Sure.
you paint large paintings, do you start from the top and then continue down, or just bounce around the?
I bounce around because I have them so laid out that all I'm doing is painting one small object at a time. And it's only when I paint enough of them that they become a painting. So I could, and my paintings are so big that I can just walk to the end of my art table and paint on a new section.
Mhm. Wow.
Do you always paint flat?
I do. Because I use so much water that it would have a tendency to run where I didn't want it to run. And I know how to make it run if I want to, but I don't want it to do it on its own.
Thank you.
Sure.
Nancy had a question. How do you determine where the secondary layer of Frisket is placed?
That's an excellent question. Most of it is by feel, but what I do is I look for something that I want to save out, either a color or a shape. Or if I haven't used Frisket in some area, I will try to get some over there so that it doesn't look empty when I take all the Frisket off. And the wonderful thing about, I keep saying Frisket, and I mean masking fluid, is that if you don't paint over it, nothing happens. So if you got some on here that you don't want, you just don't paint over it and you wipe it off. And there is a special tool. I don't know if I have it right here. Yeah.
Dave, when was the first time you came up with this experiment?
I'm sorry, could you ask again?
I said, when was the time when you came up with this particular experiment?
It just evolved. I really fell in love with the idea of Frisket, and I used it on a couple paintings. It wasn't a conscious decision that I'm going to now paint like this. It just kind of evolved into that.
And since how long you're using Daniel Smith colors?
30 years.
Oh, that's commendable.
Well, I mean, I remember Daniel Smith when they used to sell other things besides paint. One of my favorite brushes was a Daniel Smith brush.
Right. Thank you.
So that's 2 layers of Frisket, but only 1 layer of paint. I did my homework. So that's 1 layer of paint, 2 layers of Frisket. The only reason I didn't use the one that I just did is because it's sopping wet with Frisket. So now I'm going to repaint on this, knowing that some of these dots, let me see if I can remove one. One of these dots will go back to white paper. Well, that one won't, but one of these dots will go back to white paper because that was the first one I put on. And some of them will go back to a color when I paint over them. So now what you start to do is you have to remember which are your, I don't like to use the word glazing colors because I think you can glaze with any color that you want to, but you have to know what it's going to do. Some colors have more opaque than others and they cover up. Some are more transparent. They let you show through. So I'm really conscious of which ones are opaque and which ones are not. And also you have to be careful that every time you add paint to something, you're blocking more of the light that comes off the paper. So you don't want to go real heavy unless that's the goal of the whole goal of the whole painting. So I'm just reinforcing some of the earlier strokes that I did. I'm not trying to just copy it exactly. Some more of that iridescent blue. Am I still on camera? You guys are so quiet.
We're mesmerized.
Right answer.
Was going to say the same.
Me too. I'm just loving this.
Oh, thank you.
You mentioned the using transparent colors so that the light bounces off the paper.
Right.
I studied with Val Pursoon in Tacoma years ago, and she said that it's actually kind of a spiritual experience. When you look at a watercolor painting, the light is bouncing off the painting, and you have a unconscious experience of realization that you are the light.
Oh, well, I'll have to think that one through. The scientist in me is going, maybe that's right. And I'm really conscious of how far those colors are going to move by how concentrated they are when I use them, how aggressive they are.
Are you only painting over the same colors with the same colors, or do you vary
No.
that?
I vary that a lot. I think it would look too much like a color book if I did that. So I vary that a lot.
We have a question on Facebook from Linda asking, if you put acrylic soft gel on the back of paper, does that make your painting water media and not watercolor?
I'm not the judge on that. Every show is going to be different. You just have to read the prospectus very, very carefully. I consider it a surface that you're painting on, not a media that you're using. And I am going to talk a little bit about stencils also. And a lot of people are saying, well, if you use somebody else's stencil in your painting, is that an original painting then? So there's lots of territory out there for some answers.
While you're painting and working on the meditative work, I had a question earlier and I was curious what your thoughts were about what are the ways to keep growing as an artist and to keep pushing after you've, so that you don't stagnate, but so that you keep growing for your whole life. How do you keep pushing on that direction?
Actually, I have the perfect answer that I believe, but it's not from me. Actually, I'm at a place where I can stop because I think this is really important. There was an artist by the name of Wolf Kahn who did a lot of pastel work, and he did some paintings too. He died in 2020 at the age of 92. And there was a quote from him that whenever I'm stuck, I try to find it or I just memorize it. And it says, when you know how to paint something, you should by all means stop painting it. You will be ceasing to learn and not growing. And your paintings will become an exercise in self-congratulation, which it meant so much to me, that the fact that once you know how to paint it, okay, that's done. Let's try something new, try something different. My science background has always driven me to try something new. I try to have my students not say, well, what would happen if? Well, find out. It's a piece of paper. It probably, your life isn't going to depend on it. I think you just need to figure out what the if is and see if it works. That's how I move forward. Does that make sense?
Thank you so much. That's so edifying. Thank you.
Have you ever tried with it without using the masking fluid in the same texture, come up with, keeping the paper white?
Yeah, I have, but I didn't see any advantage in it when I can use it like this.
Thank you.
Dave, where are your workshops? If somebody wanted to do workshop with you, how would they find out?
Everything I have is online on mrwatercolor.com.
Watercolor.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
All of my upcoming workshops. I'm teaching a course in Italy this summer.
We pasted in the chat Dave's website and the direct link to his classes.
Yeah. And all my artwork is up there too. So, one more.
While you're transitioning, we have another question on Facebook asking about what greens you're choosing. Thanks.
What greens? I have phthalo yellow green, hooker's green, and olive green. And I use a lot of turquoise greens mixed together. So I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit more so you can see it better, I think. Yeah. So there are 2 layers of Frisket and 2 layers of paint on here now. So if you start to remove it, some of it will go back to a color. And this would be the very first one I put there. I showed you a tool that removes this. I should go find it. It just looks like the crepe sole of a shoe. Because most people, when they start to take the Frisket off, this is when they get these white lines and they don't know what to do with them. But see, this mark was the second layer of Frisket. This mark was the first layer of Frisket. I'm not going to sit here and have you watch me remove Frisket all afternoon, but I want to make a point. So you have a couple options when you get your Frisket off. You can always leave it white, but I think most of the time, I mean, the same thing would happen here. I just didn't bother to take the Frisket off. Most of the time, I just use a similar color, or you could leave it white, but I usually paint it a slightly different color. This is a little small for me. But you could also do a broader stroke and actually glaze over it so that you're not trying to so painstakingly. Now that's a little thick, so I'll spread it out. And I stopped at 2 layers because it's a demonstration. You can do as many layers as you would like, but you have to realize that every time you add paint, you're cutting light out. And as a watercolorist, you got to figure out when enough is enough, or it'll go, everything will go opaque.
While it's quiet, I'll let you know that Russ said this is the most energizing demo. He's feeling inspired to paint or to play,
Wow.
excuse me.
Isn't that nice? Thank you. I do have a lot of fun when I paint, but you know why? It's because I've done my homework. One of my instructors 30 years ago, maybe I already said it, but why are you trying to solve all your problems with a wet brush in your hand instead of doing some homework ahead of time? And the value studies and the preliminary sketches don't have to be huge things. They can be postage stamp almost, but you have to have a plan of some kind. And I realize that these will not end up in a botanical illustration of what caladium really look like, but they are what my caladium look like.
Will
And
we be able to get a copy of the chat somehow?
I don't know if the chat has copies. That would be out of my, above my pay grade. Hi, Jill. I'm going to do one other thing. I'm going to talk to you about it for a second. Me again. I'm going to do a little stencil in here for you. And I don't use them all the time. They're not foolproof, but I have designed stencils. I have a stencil cutter and I can design any stencils that I want. And that one painting I showed you at the very beginning, I often set them into wet paint and let the paint dry around them like overnight. And then when you take it off, there's an imprint of your, well, I'm saying stencil, and it really is a mask rather than a stencil. I'll show you the difference. But when you lift it off, it's an ambiguous biomorphic background of color, but not necessarily an object that's recognizable, but it's usually so organic that you know it goes with the painting that you're doing. So I could do that on a, I'll do it on a scrap, another piece of paper, not necessarily a scrap piece of paper.
While you're getting that, we have a question from Jill. She says, noticing no use of yellow this time because it's too pushy.
No, but with all the red, I have it would turn orange. And if I got into the greens, they would all become yellow greens. So I just kind of eased back on the palette a little bit so that I didn't overcomplicate it. So this is actually the stencil I used that I'm going to show you in the painting in back of me, a close-up of. I bought, I don't know if you guys know what Trader Joe's is or not, but I bought some red berries on a stick, and I scanned them and made them into a stencil. So we have these. This is cut out of Mylar. Oh, you're not looking at my. Sorry, no wonder you look funny. There we go. So these are cut out of Mylar, so they're almost indestructible. This is purple and blue because I've already used it. I was just going to show you a quick view of some of the others. Well, this is a close-up. I'll get a close-up of the one I just had in my hand. Can you see those biomorphic forms back there? And these are some other stencils that I've made.
David, are you using a Cricut to cut those?
I'm using what's called a Cricut stencil cutter.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Here's one of but mine are all from real plant life. This is from a begonia plant that so if I didn't make it really clear, these are called masks because they're the opposite of what a stencil would be. In a stencil, the paint would go here, but this is a mask, which means it's not going anywhere. Oh, and this is that same berry print that I had in the very first year.
Did you draw them or photograph them?
The stencil themselves.
Yeah, to make the
berries.
stencil. Did
I'm
they come
sorry.
from a? Did your
Dave, can you-
stencils?
Sure.
Dave, can you please back out of this picture so we could see the stencils better?
Yeah.
Thank you.
It just looks like so much fun. I'm
It
looking
is.
forward to doing it. Yeah, terrific.
Well, and this was a demonstration on how to use the stencil. It was not a demonstration on how to use a stencil in the background of a painting. This would be far too important for most of my work. So I do a lot of simple things that are a little more subtle. So I will actually just do one right here. Now, this paper is not glued down to anything. So I'll do it on this one. Maybe it's a little heavier. But if you get your paper really, really wet, and I'm thinking that wasn't watercolor paper that I picked up. And then if you set these things into them.
That looks like Yupo.
Well, you can use Yupo. Oh, you mean this paper?
Uh-huh.
Now this one isn't. I think it's cardstock.
Okay.
But I've made stencils out of Yupo before. And what you can also do is drop color once it's down on the page, squeeze your paintbrush, and it'll start to crawl around and under. And then you really have to let it dry. And then you pull it off and you'll have some kind of a mark down there that I think is a nice way to put things in the background. Cheryl, did you have a question for me that never got answered?
Yes, I was wondering, did you make your stencils? Was the beginning a photograph you took or did you draw them?
No, it's a photograph. Actually, those were red berries on a stick. And I photographed them and put them into Photoshop, turned them into black and white. And that's all I have to do to make a stencil is have a black and white image. The machine does the rest.
Thanks.
How do you cut them? How do you cut them out?
It's a stencil machine that looks a lot like a printer. It has software. You feed in the information and push a button and a little blade comes down. It's quite amazing, actually. I also design stencils for stencilgirl.com, and a lot of my stuff I buy for myself because they do a better job of cutting it. So.
On Facebook, Lauren is asking, do you ever use a limited 3-color palette? And also for the stencils, can you use acetate?
Yes, mine are acetate. What was the first part of that question? 3 colors?
Do you ever use a limited palette of 3
Oh,
colors?
no, I would never do that. Why would I do that? I have all these colors available to me. I understand the use. I teach it. I have students that do it. And I tried to do it and I couldn't figure out why I was trying so hard to do it. I thought I have and then students want to have my exact color choices. And the truth is they're only good on the day that I print that list out. Everything else in my life changes. Why would I keep the same 24 colors for 30 years? So I'm kind of a stickler about just enjoying every new color that comes along. Let me show you some this is kind of a real fast, oh, no, I'll do it this way. It's even faster. Maybe. Those are, these are the ones I showed you in the beginning, but I was going to show you the one where I used a stencil a lot. See back in here? All of that. And I did use a stencil, and I'm not here to sell stencils. It's just a new thing that I'm fascinated with. I was going to show you the big ta-da. Maybe there. That's the completed painting that's on the wall in back of me. And I know you can't see it now because we're looking at a different screen. But there's stencils back in here. And these are the two big leaves that I was painting for you. These two right here. And I was going to show you an example of, this is the berry stencil that I just used for you, but I used it on, this is actually on watercolor paper with different colors.
It looks very mysterious and
Yeah.
watery. Yeah, it's fun.
Oh, here's a close-up of the stencil. I just took a corner and blew it up. See these marks back there?
And these you left overnight, right? You left this
Yeah.
stencil overnight.
And this is just a page of some of the stencils I've made. So they're all organic. They're all from real plants. People are having fun with them.
You've been busy.
I have.
When you are putting stencils in the background, do you start the painting with doing the stencils or do you save them for?
I save them for the last because I don't want them to become too important. And I can kind of regulate that better if they're the last thing I put in the painting. Let me see what else is over here that I haven't shown you. So I think we have the whole enchilada there. So I'm glad you get to see. Let me go look again over my shoulder here by turning my camera off. There you see it over. Well, I can't ever get my head out of the way. So what other questions can I answer for you?
So I have one for you, which is you do such large paintings. How do you maintain perspective?
My perspective is not very good. I'm not at all. I just do what looks right to me. And sometimes, and I don't worry about my light source, which just makes some people so angry. I just look at the piece of paper and think, this is what it needs, and I'm going to put it there. Even though I'm a scientist and understand all of that, I don't spend a lot of time on that.
Hi, David. I know that you're mounting some of your paper onto the aluminum. Do you seal it underneath varnishes or?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that because I have it right here and I forgot to show it to you. Oh, and I have one other small thing to show you. I knew I had one. Wow, my table, I have a 12-foot working table and it's just cluttered. Let me go back to my other camera and I'll show it to you better.
I think your paintings look joyful. I think you really enjoy doing it.
That's the absolute secret to my painting. I do. This is, I use a product by Golden, it's archival varnish. That comes in 3 flavors, satin, gloss, and matte. If you're going to do varnish, the first coat should always be gloss, no matter what else it ends up. Because if you do it with a matte or a satin, it will make the dark colors go cloudy. So, and if you're going to do only one painting, this also comes in liquid form, but you have to mix it with turpentine. And so if you're only going to do one painting, I would just buy a spray of it. I use my big paintings, I mix it up and brush it on. And I was also going to show you how I don't matte my paintings. Let me back out a little bit. This is an old frame. I'm going to show you why it's all got some glue on it in a second. And all I did is I just glued the canvas on here, a yard of canvas, cut it, glued it on there. And then this is a painting that's been glued to Alumilite. And I just float them so that when they're hanging on the wall, it looks like there's a mat around it, but it's really not. It's just the edge of the board right here. And it cuts down on all the glass and all that matting stuff. I have changed my process on this a little bit. I no longer put canvas back here. I just take a canvas colored paint and sponge it on. It's much cheaper, much faster, and it gives you exactly the same effect. And
It's tricky, but it works.
it does work, yeah. It does.
What is the canvas you put on the frame there before the picture? Yes.
Well, I didn't clear the first part.
Oh, what is that? You call it a canvas. It looks like a kind
This
of
was just a
board.
yard of canvas put
Oh.
over a board.
Oh, God, thank you.
Yeah, this panel back here is the same one that the painting is glued to. I mean, it's a piece of aluminum with a yard of, well, not a yard, but with canvas on it. And that was just another step that I didn't need. So now I just paint out here.
David, can you show us a close-up of the varnished picture? I'd like to see the texture of the surface.
Sure. Well, I don't get any closer than what I showed you. I don't think. Oh, I forgot where I was. Just a minute.
May I interject?
Maybe you could just take that painting and move it closer to the camera.
The big one?
No, the birds right there.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was trying to get you to another one. Sure, I can do that. And I can zoom in on this too. I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
So the purpose of putting your paper on aluminite or whatever the aluminum base is the only problem that solves is buckling.
No, I don't have to put them under glass or mat them.
Okay, so it solves the post picture and it solves the buckling.
Yeah.
You should write like a list of all your problems and how you solve them.
How much time do you have?
Thank you.
Sure. Does that get you a little closer?
I have a question. When you put your stencil down, do you ever cover it and weigh it down overnight, or do you just leave it open?
No, there's a little capillary action that sucks underneath and kind of holds it in place. I've never had one curl up. Well, first of all, it's acetate and it wouldn't curl. But I've never had one kind of lift off on its own. And they don't stick. You know, you can just pick them off with your fingers too.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Hi, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Very nice seeing your demonstration. Thank you so much.
Sure.
My question is that, is it possible that someday you can have a session where you can show us how you did this framing?
The framing?
Yeah, because you said you color the canvas also.
Right. Now, on the one in back of me, it's not canvas back there. I just painted this before I glued this on. I know that sounded confusing. I shouldn't confuse the two. The one in back of me is floating on a surface that's just been painted to look bumpy.
No, I'm requesting you, if you someday you could have a session where you could show us the process.
Sure. It's not very complicated, but I would be glad to.
Thank you so much.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
How do you protect your paintings? You say you don't put glass over them.
Right. I varnish.
A varnish, and is that golden varnish you were showing us?
Yes. But
Okay.
you have to be careful if you're going to enter them in a show. Some people take varnish paintings, some don't, you know. But I found a workaround. If I put a pastel mark on that painting, I would call it mixed media. And then all the rules are off when you do a mixed media painting.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Do you mask the images before you start painting the backgrounds?
Yeah. And remember, the Fresco doesn't have to go all on at one time or all off at one time. You could take it off a little bit at a time and reapply. It's just like many, many layers of what you can do. The one I did was the most straightforward. 2 layers of paint, 2 layers of Fresco.
But do you use layers of varnish in the painting itself or
No,
just
the varnish is just a protection at the end.
at the end? Thank you.
Yeah.
How many layers of varnish?
If you're going to spray it, it should be at least 3. If you're going to brush it on, you only need 1 or 2.
And you never use cold wax?
I have. I'm experimenting with it right now. Not a problem, but I have to know more about how archival that is before I would tell students to use it. And I just haven't done a lot of research on it, but I know there are thousands of people doing it right now. Oh, which reminds me, I have a watercolor group on Facebook. It's called David R. Daniels Watercolor Group. It's open to anyone who's interested in watercolor. It's mostly my students, but now students and good friends, you're all invited. I think I do have to click a button that says you're accepted, but my criteria is not real hard. You just have to want to be in the room. So if you want to, and a lot of my students post my challenges there and get critiques and feedback on their work.
Could you mention that group one more time, please?
It's David R. Daniels Watercolor Group.
It's pasted in the chat.
Oh, it's pasted in the chat.
David, thank you for joining us today. It was wonderful watching your painting techniques. We could probably watch you for hours. Thank you very much.
Well, I hope the fact that I had to do a small one, there's just no way to do a bigger one.
Sure.
I kind of truncated it the best I could. Okay.
As a recovering botanist, I had my degree from UC Davis. It's great to see a botanist.
You should never be a recovering botanist.
Well, confused. I went from botany to computer science, then to business. So it's been a road.
My formal training in botany and biology, I went all the way through college as I was going to be a biology teacher. And then in my senior year, I switched to art. So, well, you know.
I'm glad you did.
So much. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much. See you next week.
Camp.
Thank you.
Fabulous.
Bye.